Eerily haunting true stories about remote abandoned locations rich in history. Come with us in our travels from state to state, if you dare.
Be the last time anybody sees us alive. I don't know where she has us, but we're gonna get something killed.
Hello? Gina, there is a beehive over there. Do you see that in the hole?
Buckle up, Buttercup.
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I'm Shannon.
I'm Gina.
Yeah. Introduce ourselves.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. Oh, well, can I share?
Yeah, she's going to share regardless if I
share.
tell her yes or no. She's feeling really sorry for herself right now.
I'm a baby. I'm going to just throw that out there. Everybody knows I'm a baby. I went to go get my physical because they wanted to, check my blood pressure and everything because I'm at that age. And so I go into the doctor's office and I know that I'm going for a flu shot, but while I'm there, she says, you're going to have to get a tetanus shot. You haven't had it in 10 years. And I said, no, that's impossible. I think I had it. I'm thinking I just had it a couple years ago and I'm trying to remember. And I have different doctors that I go see. So I'm looking, because I have all these apps with all this information. I'm trying to find it. Please find that I already got my tetanus shot and I couldn't find it anywhere. And she's like, well, we just want to be safe. You can't, at first she tells me you can't get it. If you've already have it, no, you can't get it. And then she comes back after saying that to somebody who's already scared to take Tylenol.
She told me that she broke out into a sweat.
I did. I started sweating. I'm thinking I'm having a reaction.
She had to take a Xanax.
I took a Xanax and right in front of the nurse, I'm like, I'm going to have to take a Xanax before you give me this tetanus shot because you're coming back here after 5 minutes of telling me there's no way I can take a tetanus shot because I think I might have had one too. Oh no, the doctor says it's fine. You can take it. And so then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get doubled up on the tetanus shot. This is what happens when you double up on a tetanus shot.
She's going to get rabies.
But
oh my God, she's really going to show you guys. She's really doing this.
You're going to have to see this.
She's really doing it.
I had to show everybody. I'm like, I called my husband afterwards. I'm crying. Well, almost, how I get. But I'm like, babe, I just got a tetanus shot. But I don't know if you guys can see this. Wait, where is it?
That's right there. You can see it.
Look how huge this thing. It's the size of a softball.
Yeah, it's actually. I mean, as much as I'm laughing at her, it's really not funny because it's like a golf ball inside of there, and it's hot, like it's on fire.
It's on fire, and it itches like crazy. And so just everybody tell me when my last day is going to be and how long do I have to live. That's all I need. Just leave it in the comments because
we just need to record this episode.
Gina wouldn't let me take a break. I called her and said, I'm really, really sick. I can't come in. And she said, no, you are coming in because the fans need you. No, I'm just kidding. But no,
no, that was actually me that canceled.
Yeah. And she was like, well, Gina's also been struggling with a little bit of.
Yeah, I'm not feeling the greatest. I'm a little under the weather, as you can tell. I apologize for my voice, my nasal. It sounds awful. I'm so sorry. We were supposed to record Friday night and I canceled. And then here we are Sunday. And I'm not sure if I even sound any better today than I did Friday. So I apologize. But so we're here.
Yeah.
So I'll be drinking water the whole time so I don't keep clearing my throat. I apologize again. And
we have that new little on air I saw.
Yeah, we got a new little gift again. Johnny buys stuff all the time. And so we have like 3 different on air signs. So I have to tell you a funny story really quick before we start. So yesterday he was helping me do like the backdrops and stuff because, I do everything wrong. So he's just like, at one point he looked at me, he's like, you're so cute.
That's all they have left to say when they're just like, they have no more words left.
I think he was really frustrated with me. So anyway, he was over there and he was nailing something up or pushing a thumbtack into the wall. And the whole top, like the head part of the thumbtack, it broke off and he pushed it into his thumb.
Oh, no.
So he didn't even say anything. Like he didn't say he didn't say anything. So I turn around and he's just looking at his thumb. And then I looked, and if you look behind you, there's blood.
Oh my gosh, I see it.
You guys can't see it. We'll have to post a picture here, but there's actually like streaks of his blood all down the side of the wall.
We're going to actually have to do a missing persons report on Johnny. I actually, honestly, I have not heard from him or seen from him in days, and I don't know where he's at. And we might have his blood splatter on the wall. So I'm just saying, like, even though
I actually
Gina's
got like really
my friend,
excited. I was like, oh my God, babe, look, there's blood on the wall. And he looked at me and he's like, it scares me that you're that excited about that. Cause I'm like, couldn't you have done it closer to the middle so we could see it?
If we have more blood splattered on this wall
Every week it's going to get a little more and a little more.
We are really going to need to demand that we see Johnny for proof of life. That's all.
Right. Yeah. I promise, guys, he's still here. I promise. I promise. I did not take him out. If anybody does, he's going to be the one to take me out.
He's done.
He's done already.
Well, tonight's episode's kind of
we have to show our sweatshirts.
Oh, we do.
Put your laptop down a little bit or scoot over or do something. Yeah. So we got, this way. We got some of our merch in for our Patreons. And so our Patreons, by the time this episode airs, it I promise will be in the mail. I don't know if it will be to you yet, but it will be in the mail. I promise. I've got a lot going on right now. Like, I really have a lot. When I say I have a lot going on right now, like, that's not an understatement. Yeah.
That's a quiet Patreon episode.
Yeah. I can't talk about it, but I have a lot going on. But anyway, stand up and show the back because.
Oh, do I get to be the model?
Oh, do you want me to do it?
No.
I feel like it's just easier for you to move around where you're at than it is for me.
It might be. Hold on.
I don't want to knock all my books off the shelf.
How can I do this sexy? Hold on. Let me take this off. Hold on.
This just turned into a whole different kind of episode.
How can I crawl up on here? Hold on.
You guys notice at no point did I ask her to crawl on anything or make anything sexy. There we go. So these are. I sound like I just smoked a pack of Camels. You are.
I missed my calling.
So these are our new merch. Shannon's dad made us into cartoon characters, and the back says "Buckle Up, Buttercup." So, and then the front just says 50 States of Madness podcast. But they're super cool. So, everyone on our Patreon will be getting these shirts, and eventually, when we get our merch up and stuff, this design's pretty pricey because of all of the colors that are involved. But we will have just our shirts or merch with just our regular 50 States of Madness logo on there that don't have so many colors. Thank you for moving my candle.
You're welcome. I was like,
Johnny asked me yesterday, how many times have you dropped this candle? I said, none. Shannon drops it every week.
I do.
Like, oh, okay.
And it's so beautiful.
So anyway, I think that's all of our announcements. I would like to say before we start this episode that this one is just like last week's, but this one is we talk about a few more victims than last week. Pardon me. And it's a little graphic, and it deals with children, a lot of children. And so if you're sensitive to anything of that nature, then please know that this episode is quite graphic.
Yeah, this might not be the episode for you.
Yeah. So last week we started with the Texas killing fields, and like we said, there's 33 plus victims that are involved in the Texas killing fields. So we should have started with this episode. It's kind of done in decades, and it's kind of separated by people that they think are involved, and maybe I guess
suspects.
Yeah, we'll just say suspects because again, the victims that we are going to talk about today, they're still unsolved, unfortunately.
There's two of them where
yeah,
they say it's been solved.
Yeah, they have a suspect, and
they had somebody who served time for it, but it gets a little bit dicey and tricky, and there's a lot of key players, and it kind of intertwines with
A little
each other.
bit.
So we'll try to make it as clear as possible for you.
Yeah. So the murders that we're going to talk about today, last week we talked about most of the murders that we talked about were from the 80s. These that we're going to talk about today are from the 70s. So we talked about last week, we talked about Clyde Hedrick, and how we believe was responsible for a lot of those, if not all, of the girls that we talked about, from the 1980s that went missing. And then today we're going to talk about 11 girls. And I'm just going to, I'm going to go through, I'm just going to give like a brief description. I'm going to say their name. We were going to talk about just a few because we actually were able to visit one of their graves.
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought just out of respect, we need to just touch on all of them.
They're worth mentioning. And
yes.
We did visit a lot of the towns along the way that they're
Yeah.
from. We did see a lot of the places, and we drove up and down the I-45. So,
And that's basically where this all takes place, is between Houston and Galveston, along the I-45, Interstate 45, and all of the cities that run along there. Okay, so the cities that we're going to talk about today are going to be Houston, Galveston, Webster, Dickinson, Clear Lake, and Alvin, Texas. Are there any others that? Oh,
I think
Pasadena.
Yeah, Pasadena.
Pasadena.
I think Texas City, right? You
Texas
mentioned-
City, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and those are all little cities that fall in between Houston and Galveston along the I-45.
The suburbs
Yeah.
of Houston.
Yeah. So the first victim that we are going to talk about, her name is Colette Wilson, and she was 13 years old. She was dropped off by a band leader at a bus stop in Alvin, Texas on June 17th, 1971, and she went missing after that. 5 months later, her body was later found near Addicks Reservoir in Houston, West Houston, 35 miles from where she was last seen. She had been killed by a gunshot wound to the head.
And it's very important to mention how a lot of these
a lot of
girls
their
were
matters of death
killed.
were very, very similar, and where their bodies were disposed of also are very similar. So then we have Gloria Gonzalez. She was 19 years old. She went missing on October 28th, 1971, near her home in Houston. Her body was found 35 yards from where Colette Wilson's body was found.
so close.
Very, very close. A lot of these girls are found very, very close to each other. As, again, we saw in last week's episode too. She died from blunt force trauma to the head. Then we have Brenda Jones, and she was 14 years old. She disappeared while walking to a Galveston hospital to visit her aunt on July 1st, 1971. Her body was found the next day floating in a nearby Galveston Bay, close to Seawolf Parkway. She had a slip crammed in her mouth, and she died of a head wound. Then we have two girls, and they also, there's 3 set, they call them the 3 pairs.
Yeah, there's 3 sets that
because 3 of these sets of girls went missing together.
Yes.
So we have Debbie Ackerman, who we visited her grave. We went to pay our respects to the cemetery that she is buried at. And then she went missing with another girl named Maria Johnson. And they were both 15 years old. So these girls went to Ball High School, which we also visited. We went to Ball High School. And they were both last seen they were from Galveston. They were last seen getting into a white van.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because actually one of their classmates saw them getting into the white van at the time, and that one of the things that she noted was they seemed to have known the person they were jumping into the van with.
Right.
Like it was apparent that they were familiar with this
the
person, and we will get into that person.
Yeah.
But
And so she their friend, she worked at a Baskin Robbins ice cream shop. They were there, and that's where she saw them get into this van. They were apparently headed to a mall to go shopping.
In Houston, right?
In
They were
Houston.
hitchhiking to Houston?
No, to the Galveston Mall.
Oh, to the Galveston Mall. Okay.
Maybe that's where they were coming from, or because I believe they might have been hitchhiking to Houston.
Yeah.
And I also want to say a lot of these girls were said to be big hitchhikers. And I think that like in the 70s, that was a very, very common thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people did it. That's just how they got from place to place. I mean, in this day, I never, never, ever. But I think in the 70s, it was just a very common thing for young girls to hitchhike. So both girls went missing on November 15th, 1971, and their bodies were found 2 days later, 10 miles north of where they disappeared. They were discovered by a fisherman in Turner's Bayou in Texas City. Both girls were shot twice and dumped in the water. Their hands and feet were both bound, and they were partially clothed. So I believe that on November 17th, Maria Johnson's body was found by a fisherman. And then it was later in the evening, and then the next day they went back out to look for Debbie Ackerman, and I believe she was found the following day in the same area, in the same manner of death. And then now we have Kimberly Pitchford. She's 16 years old. She was last seen January 3rd, 1973. At a driving school in Pasadena, Texas. She was supposed to call home for a ride, but nobody ever heard from her. Her body was found 2 days later in a ditch near Angelton, which is 30 miles south of where she was last seen. Her cause of death was strangulation. Her uncle, she had an uncle named Ray Pitchford, and he told police that there was a possible serial killer that around the same time attended that same driving school.
Oh.
Yeah. But
that's
nothing,
just speculation,
nothing
right?
ever came of his statement, and it's still an unsolved case. Then we have Georgia Gear, who was 14, and Brooks Bracewell, who's 12. Both girls had skipped school, and these are part of the three pairs.
Yeah.
They went missing together.
Another set.
So both of these girls skipped school on September 6, 1974. They both disappeared from a convenience store in Dickinson's, Texas. Both of them had been beaten to death and were found in a swamp in Alvin.
Yeah, I was watching a lot of the information that we got this from was a show called The 11. And they get into a lot of detail.
They do. They go into a lot of detail.
Yeah, when they skipped school, I thought that's when they went missing, but they went in to say that even after school got out, that her sister saw her at a pool hall, and that they played pool. And it was funny because it was a bar/pool hall, and the kids hung
12
out.
years old, 12 and 14.
Hanging out at a bar.
Yeah.
Where grown men were going to drink and at a pool hall and just playing pool and hanging out. And that the sister went to the car, and they kind of followed, and she was with two other friends.
She asked her for a ride.
She asked her sister for a ride. Her sister said, the car's full. You found your way here. Find your way home. And that was the last her sister ever saw her.
Last time. And that, I mean, and that's like the guilt, unfortunately, that this girl's gonna have to live with forever. And that is so shitty. Like, that just, I can't, I mean, but as a kid, like, especially for her sister's older, she doesn't want her little sister, like you just think about, I mean, I don't have any siblings, but I know my kids, like my son probably would have told my daughter the same thing, like find your way home,
Yeah, you ditched school, you're old enough to ditch school.
Yeah, find your way home, I don't want my little sister hanging around.
And it was like less than a mile away. They could walk, so.
Yeah, so, these are really sad situations.
Yeah.
And then we have Suzanne Bowers. They called her Susie. She went missing while walking home from her grandmother's house in Galveston. Her remains were found a few miles away from where this man that we're going to talk about Shannon's going to get into him, but her remains were found very close to where he was living at that time. Yeah. And then our two last ones are another pair of girls, Sharon Shaw and Rhonda Renee Johnson. I believe she went by Renee Johnson. They were last seen August 4th, 1971, heading towards Jericho Surf and Sea Shop in Galveston. On January 3rd, 1972, two boys were fishing on Taylor Bayou in Webster and found a human skull floating in the lake. 6 weeks after, authorities were searching a nearby field. They found the rest of her remains along with the remains of another girl. They were both later identified as Sharon Shaw and Rhonda Renee Johnson.
It's so sad.
So these are 11 girls. And I just want to say, Shannon mentioned the show, The 11, that we watched. And it's fantastic. Like, it gives you like a breakdown of all of these, all of these stories, these girls' stories and everything. It is a little one-sided.
It's very biased because they really, really want to nail this one particular person with it.
Which, when you hear the evidence that Shannon's going to give you, it's kind of a given. But again, as we've talked about, I think in the last 2 episodes, to us sitting at home, it looks like you have enough evidence to convict them. But in a court of law, that doesn't always work. So,
and we don't know what other evidence the cops have or the detectives and how much further. We're just taking it at face value of what we hear, read, so
yeah, for sure.
That's why we like to go visit it, but we're not feet on the ground detectives. So
yeah.
I just wanted to add something that was pretty interesting, and tell me if you mentioned it, because I don't think you did, how they identified Colette Wilson's body.
I didn't mention that, but that's So Colette Wilson was the first victim that I talked about, and her remains were found. Her jawbone was found, and her father was called to identify her, and he had to identify her jawbone because he was a dentist. So he actually identified her jawbone by the work that he had done in her mouth.
Isn't that I would not think that awful. You would call the father for something like that.
I mean, obviously, if you're identifying an entire body, then you're going to call a family member or a friend, somebody. But I mean, to identify a job, I can't imagine. Yeah. So, I mean, the stuff that these families not only probably are still going through, because a lot of, in this show, they try to contact a lot of these families, and some of the families are they don't want to talk about it.
No.
They don't want to be, it's been 50 years now, and they're just, we're done. We're just done. We just want to live out the rest of our lives, especially their parents and stuff like that, who are probably in their 80s and 90s at this point, are just, I just want to live out the rest of my life. Like, I've dealt with this for the last 50 years. Like, I'm done. But some of the parents and family members are very, still very much into trying to find somebody. So
very cooperative.
Yeah.
Because they want to know what happened.
Yeah, they want answers.
Yeah. So we're going to focus a little bit on Rhonda Renee Johnson and her friend Sharon Shaw. So Rhonda was just 11 years old when her mother left home. She was raised by her father and had to grow up fast. Music and ocean was her escape. And you'll find that a lot of these girls, they surfed. These ones actually went to water ski school.
Yeah.
The 2 girls. She loved Janis Joplin and would hitchhike to the beach to surf. Along with her friend Sharon Shaw, it was her best friend, and she was described as confident, street smarts, natural leader, and loved to surf. And she had a dream of surfing in California. Yeah. So these 2 girls, when they went missing from a small town called Webster. The town of Webster only had about 1,500 residents in this small town. And so when they went missing, Renee's grandfather was actually the former mayor of Webster. And at this time, he sat on the city council. So at this time, there was a police chief, and the grandfather of Renee did not think he was doing enough, did not think it was moving fast enough. They weren't making an arrest. They weren't getting who did this to his granddaughter. He wanted answers, and it wasn't happening fast enough for him. So he decided, along with the councilman, to fire this police chief. And they brought in 2 men.
Chief of police.
What did I say?
Police of chief.
Chief of police.
I mean, we can leave it if you want.
We're going to keep it there. Because it's not a show unless I do something like that. It's the way I talk. And I even told her before I did this episode, it's so much information in my brain and so much that we've learned about it.
Yeah,
and I
it's a
was
lot.
really nervous to do it because, to keep the facts straight and try to remember everything in order, because it's, like I said before, it's so intertwined with 2 serial killers, 2 people, not even serial killers, just 2
and I did the easy part
suspects.
Talking about the girls, but like what you're going to talk about can get a little confusing.
It is a lot of confusing for me, but I just want to make sure the story is correct and we keep it straight. So this police chief who was fired, he got removed from the position and a new one came in, and this guy's name was Don Morris. And Don Morris brought in an assistant police chief, a guy by the name of Tommy Lee Deal. And they were brought in to work on it. And within 9 days, they had arrested a suspect in the murder of these 2 girls. Within 9 days. So they arrested a guy by the name of Michael Lloyd Self. He was described as a man, and these are the words they used, and it's probably not necessarily the words I would use. I would say like a learning disability, but they said a stunted mental growth. But to me, that's a learning disability. He drove a tow truck. He worked in an all-day garage, and he volunteered at the firehouse cleaning trucks. He was arrested twice before for peeping Tom complaints. He confessed after he was arrested to murdering these 2 girls. But he had not really a lot of details. Like the details that he made in this confession was not corroborated with the evidence that they were finding. Well, lo and behold, 3 days later, another confession comes out, and all of a sudden, all these facts start, making sense. They start lining up with what the investigation is finding. So after that, he agreed to go out with these investigators to these locations to show them where he grabbed the girls, where he drove them out to, where he killed them, where he dumped their bodies, what happened. He had this whole story, everything that happened, and he showed these investigators where to go. But during this time, he'd flip-flop. Like, nope, it wasn't, I didn't do it. But then all of a sudden he's like, yes, I did it. I'll take you to, where I dumped their bodies. And in one of his first confessions, he states he's with Renee in the car and they went to Sharon's house to pick her up. But at that point that he's saying that this is happening, the girls were already reported missing. So he has no timeline. He has no clue what's going on. I want to say he was being fed information. And the more you look into it and the more you start listening to what happened. And then also there's a problem with the location. In the first confession, the bodies were dumped too far from where they were found. In the second confession, he has them dumped a lot closer to where they were found. So it appears in the second confession, it was written to match what the investigators knew about the murders, what they're starting to find, what they started to know. All of a sudden, he's matching it. But years later, when Michael Self is interviewed about the case, he actually states that the reason why he confessed to these killings was that this police chief, Don Morris, played, I'm going to say, Russian roulette with him. Yeah. So he states that he took out his gun. He dumped all the 5 casings into his hand of his revolver. I don't even know what kind of gun. I'm going to say revolver. He dumps out the casings. He puts one of the bullets.
He dumps out the bullets.
Those are the shell casings, how after there. He dumps out the bullets. He puts one bullet into the chamber, closes the chamber, spins it, and then puts the gun to the guy's head, Self's head, and says, you're going to write this confession. This is what Michael is saying in an interview happened to him and the reason why he confessed to the killings of these 2 girls. The reason why it's starting to be questioned is because this is where it intertwines with another serial killer, another person of interest, is Edward Bell. And this guy actually had started to confess or wrote a confession letter about killing 11 girls. It started off with 7, and then he ended up raising it up to 11. But the details that he puts in, it's not even details, because some of them, it's just kind of like one brunette and one blonde from a town
and he'll give
called
like
Dickinson.
he'll just give like initials, like on for Gloria, it just like says GG.
Yes, he doesn't know a lot about. He probably doesn't remember a lot, but this is. I do have to say he started writing some of these confession letters around the same time that this is all happening, because he's writing them to the police department. And at this time, though, it's just so intertwined. But so this guy, Michael Self, he says that this police chief played Russian roulette with him. Well, when they interviewed another investigator who had never spoken to Self, who had worked with Don Morris at one point, little light bulb went off and said, hey, this guy Don Morris, I witnessed him doing this to another guy to get a confession, another person of interest, another suspect he had in custody, that he actually had witnessed him playing the same game with him. How would Michael Self know about that game?
Yeah, he would have no idea.
If it hadn't actually happened. Mm-hmm. So I'm giving a lot of credit to this Michael Self for doing this. Also later on, he was actually given the opportunity to be granted parole if he would just confess and show remorse for the killing of Renee and Sharon Shaw. And he said, no, I'm not going to confess to what I didn't do. I'd rather die in here. Yeah. And I mean, eventually
that's what
he does. He does end up dying in there. And the Webster police at that time did have a reputation for being very heavy-handed in the law. Like, going out.
It's just so sad to know that this guy, not to say that he wasn't guilty of anything, like probably not with these girls. I mean, he obviously had other charges against him, peeping Tom, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just so sad that he served time
until his death
in prison and died for 2 crimes that he didn't commit.
And he might not even be part of it, because I'm going to get into a little bit of history of Don Morris and Tommy Lee Dill.
Yeah.
So after they were touted as these great heroes who put away this guy who killed these young girls from the small town of Webster, 9 days, got the confession, got everything, guys locked up, put away. The grandfather, the former mayor, he's happy, everybody's happy that this happened. These guys 3 years later are actually facing charges for bank robbery. They are crazy. Going around the Houston area and around Texas robbing banks. Yeah. The police chief and the assistant police chief. They were put in jail for it. 3 years later, Tommy Lee Dill gets out. He continues to rob banks till he's put away for 70 years to life for robbing banks. And when it's crazy. I mean, these guys are criminals who put away this poor guy based off a confession playing Russian roulette with this guy.
Yeah.
Who were
criminals themselves.
And this guy had a learning disability. Yeah. So Michael Self
sounds like what did I tell you the other day? Oh my God. Listeners, help me. Making a murder.
Yes. It's
same exact thing.
It's same exact crazy that, and when you have to watch this documentary on it, because
it's really good. It's only 6 episodes.
It's really good.
It's really, really good though.
But when they're talking to Tommy Lee Dill in prison, and they're talking to him about him, convicting Michael Self and how he may be innocent of not murdering, from murdering these 2 young girls, how they might not have the right guy. And he said, he will not admit he did it because he's saying he's innocent and he would rather die in jail, and that he did pass away in jail. And Tommy Lee Dill says, not the rocker, says something to the effect like, yeah, that's a shame. And when you hear that, it's almost like he's saying, yeah, we know, like,
yeah, I know. I know what I did.
I know what I did.
No remorse whatsoever.
No, it's a shame. The guy ended up dying in prison for a crime he didn't commit. That's what I said. He's going to end up, he died in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And Tommy Deal says, yeah, that's a shame. Almost like admitting, like, yeah, we know he was in jail and he didn't do it.
Yep.
Just to get the glory and everything of putting away this guy. It's crazy.
And how ironic he ends up in prison himself.
Yeah. And there was a George A. Kelt, a retired federal magistrate judge, who reviewed, and there's a whole case right here that you can read on when Michael Lloyd Self was trying to get these charges dismissed or appealed. Mm-hmm. And a retired federal magistrate judge who reviewed his appeal back in 1990, Self's appeal, he said it's an uncorroborated confession alone is insufficient to convict. He's saying that just by having a confession, you cannot convict somebody just on one confession.
No, because I feel like this happens way more than we realize. Maybe not in this manner. Like maybe they're not holding a gun to their head. But I feel like
way more than we know. Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of head games that go on and people are just forced into confessing.
Yeah. If you just say it, we'll let you go out of this, wall. We won't, no food, no water, it's just like so the prosecution came back and said, but hey, we did get it corroborated. He showed us. Remember I told you he took us to the spot where, he picked up the girls. He took us to the spot where he dumped the bodies. He took us to the spot where the bodies, where we found the bodies. But, he took us to these 3 different locations where he killed the girls, where he picked up the girls, where he killed the girls, and where he dumped their body. He took us to these locations. And the investigator came back and said, yeah, if I told you that I killed John F. Kennedy, and I'm going to take you to the spot in front of the library, where I was when John Kennedy was shot. He goes, it's public knowledge. He goes, that town,
same thing.
He said it was the exact same thing. He goes, that town was so small. It only had, that's why it was very important for me to tell you, it only had 1,500 people.
Yeah, everybody knew.
Everybody knew where the locations were.
Yeah.
And he wasn't driving the car. The investigators, the prosecution was driving the car. The cops were driving the car, so he's saying you cannot, that is not corroborated evidence.
Nope.
And so, it's so sad. So Michael Self did die in prison in the year 2000. And Tommy Dill admitted that him and Don might have framed Self. And so it's just, his exact words were, God damn, that's a shame.
Yeah.
And to me, that just statement says so much right there.
Of course.
So Larry Dean Dickens was a 26-year-old ex-Marine. On August 24th, 1978, he was shot and killed in front of his house by Edward Bell. Edward Bell was driving his red and white GMC truck around Pasadena, Texas, and stopped in front of a group of young girls, pulled down his pants, and began masturbating in front of them. I'm going to tell you, Edward Bell was sick in the head.
When I was about 25 years old, I became a flasher.
Where did you meet the girls that you flashed?
Well, wherever they were.
Yeah.
In the interview, I think he says when I was 3 years old is when it started.
Yeah. And I think because he suffered a lot of abuse too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a lot in history.
And he has a whole reason behind why he turned out this way too.
Oh yeah. The program.
The program.
Seems to believe that government agents working on a secret operation called the program somehow brainwashed him into committing acts of violence.
I want to know more about the program.
It started at an early age. My life is not normal. Something's wrong.
Do you think that the program made you kill 7 girls?
I think the program is what caused me to do the bad things that I did in my life.
Was the program making you want to rape girls?
I did have that problem.
That's another whole episode.
I'm telling you, this is so in depth that I do encourage you. We could, just like the series, we can sit here and talk about it for 6 hours, but we're trying to get this all into a little bit, a 1 hour episode, and it's just so much information. But his actions caught the attention of Larry. And Larry, he had a young daughter at the time who was 3 years old. And so he was pissed when he saw this. So he went running to go grab Edward Bell's keys and to stop him. And Edward Bell then pulled out a pistol and shot Dickens. And he shot him 4 times. And Larry went running towards his garage. The mom his mother was seeing all this from a window in her house, was looking out the window, saw this happening, ran to the garage from the house where Larry was dripping blood, but still wanted to stop Edward Bell and was still coming towards Edward Bell. Edward Bell turns around, walks back to his car calmly. Mm-hmm. Larry collapses in the driveway.
In his mom's arms.
Edward Bell comes back with the rifle, shotgun, and shoots him in the head. No reason to come back. He had already shot him 4 times.
Yep.
And comes back and shoots him in the forehead and kills him dead.
In his mom's arms.
In his mom's arm. At the same time, his sister's coming down the street. She's coming home from school. She's coming down the street.
The 911 call the mom made is just gut-wrenching to hear her say, like, he's already dead.
Yeah. And the sister's screaming. The sister watched him die. And the daughter's right there on the lawn. Mm-hmm. And, she doesn't really know what's going on. Yeah. She was only 3 years old at the time. But,
and they interview them in this show, in the 11 also.
Yeah, they do. And so Edward took off, he fled, but within 20 minutes.
Yeah, he was caught.
He was caught. They had a description of his car. He was caught. He was arrested. He was put in jail. This is in 1978. The reason why this is so important is because all the girls that we talked about all went missing 71.
Yeah, it started 72. In 71 and then kind of ended in 78.
It ended in, yeah. And so the timeline matches. So what happened with Edward Bell is he made bail. He was released on a $125,000 bail bond and fled. For the next 14 years, he traveled around various locations, including Mexico, Central America, using a sailboat and using his dead cousin's name, Cecil Boyd. And you also said that he used other names.
He did. He, when he finally fled, and he went to stay somewhere for a long time, he ended up in Panama. And in Panama, they knew him as Wally.
Yeah.
And Butch, I think. But the people around Panama that they spoke to knew him as Wally.
Yeah. And you were saying that he had a girlfriend.
He did. So,
and how old was that girlfriend?
She was, I believe, 16 years old.
16
she already,
years old.
Yeah. So he,
the same age as these other girls who went missing.
Yeah. So he flees to Panama. He's there living at on a yacht. He's on a boat.
Yeah.
And he is living with a 16-year-old girl. And this 16-year-old girl was asked, did you ever think anything of the age difference between you two? And she said, no, when you're in love, you're in love. Like that, I was grown for, more mature than normal 16-year-olds because she had already had it. She had a daughter.
Oh.
She had a young daughter, which is scary to know, that he was probably around this young child also.
And I want you to know, this is not the first time this man has been caught masturbating or exposing himself to girls. He had a long history.
He's got a laundry list of stuff that just goes on and on and on. So to know that he was, exposed to this little girl also. And so she was, completely unaware of his past, obviously. But he lived there until 1993 in Panama with her.
Well, until 1993, because on December 2nd, 1992, The television show Unsolved Mysteries aired an episode about the murder of Dickens. After airing the episode, a man recognized Bell as someone he had recently conducted business with in Panama City. On February 14, 1943, a joint operation conducted by the FBI and with the Panamanian National Police led to Bell's arrest at a yacht club in Panama City. At his June trial, Bell's attorneys attempted to argue that the killings was done in self-defense, claiming that Dickens was an unstable man who had threatened to kill him in the name of Jesus. This argument was disproven, and Bell was subsequently convicted and sentenced to 70 years imprisonment. After his sentencing, Bell claimed he had quit being a flasher while in Panama, but expressed regret that he had not done earlier so Dickens' life could be spared.
So, they interview this girl, this 16-year-old girl who's now not 16, obviously, anymore. And it was very sad to listen to her interview because the way that she explains it is that they were asleep in bed. It was like 7 o'clock in the morning. Police come in, guns drawn, take him, handcuff him, arrest him, take him. She never sees him again. Never hears anything else. She had no idea of his history. Nothing. She's lived all these years of her life not knowing what happened to him or anything at all. And she gets very emotional when they tell her, you know, his long history of what he's done. And they also, while they're in Panama, they're asking people if there were any cases of missing girls around the time that he was there, and there was. But unfortunately, at the time that he was there, I think there was a lot of not so good things going on in Panama at that time.
Yeah.
And so the way
a lot
that
of cartel stuff.
Yeah, they just explained it like all that evidence has been destroyed. So who knows? Nobody will ever know. What he did in Panama, but I can't believe that he went there and didn't do anything.
He just stopped. Well, it's funny because he spent time in Costa Rica for 2 years. Well, from 88 to 89. He moved every few months around, and you're thinking like, well, what did he do during this time? Why is he moving so often?
I mean, I think when he first fled, he probably was scared that he was going to get caught. So he was probably trying to move around. And then, you know, as years progressed and it got further and further, he probably just got more comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm not going to get caught. What are they going to do to me? I'm not even in the country.
Yeah.
What are they going to do to me?
They can't find me. I'm Wally.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going by a whole different name now.
Yeah.
So who knows what was going through his head.
So a little bit about Edward Howard Bell. Just a little background. He was born on May 26, 1939 in southern Texas. His father was an oil field worker who frequently moved the family to various towns surrounding the Houston area. And he allegedly suffered physical abuse from both him, his scoutmasters at the Boy Scouts, and one of his cousins. So this is the abuse that we were talking about that he claimed that he had experienced. He would also claim in later interviews that his father encouraged him to do violent crime ranging from robbing banks and raping girls, in addition to encouraging him to kill himself. Yeah. So he doesn't paint his dad as a very good man.
Obviously didn't have a very good role model.
No, and you can't really find a lot about him, like on his background. It's very limited information on him.
Yeah.
But this man grows up to be kooky.
Like, just to watch his interviews that he did with these what were they? Were they investigative reporters, like from TV?
She got the one who was investigating. Yeah, they were just trying to
like link him to all of these 11
murders.
He calls them in his letter the 11 that went to heaven.
Because he wrote to them. So he was sending out this information to the police department. The police department kind of put it in a file, didn't even pay attention to it because they got self on 2 of them. They didn't connect anybody else. It kind of went into a cold case, kind of Edward Bell's cold case file, you know, kind of with Larry's Dickens murder and stuff. So it kind of went to the back burner when he was writing them as corresponding with an investigator.
Yeah, like one of them's 2011, one's 2013. And she numerous times went into prison and met with him. And also they exchanged letters. And initially he confessed to 7.
Yeah, and very cooperative.
And
writing down initials, what they look like,
right,
where he picked them up at, how he killed them. Yeah.
And then later he says, I'm also responsible for 5 more, but that puts it at 12. So then she was like, okay, well, who's the 12th one? Like, I think there was a lot of back and forth going on there. And then he recants everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. He says that. And even, in this interview that she does with him, he is even saying that he denies murdering the ex-Marine. Yeah, he says, I haven't murdered anybody. And she's asking him questions, and he says to her, when I'm a free man and I'm walking the streets, then I'll tell you the real story. But as of now, all I can say is I'm not responsible for anything, and I didn't murder anybody.
Crackpot. Telling.
And the way that, it's so scary to see his gestures, his face, the way he smirks, the way he smiles and giggles and laughs when he's talking, just about everything, about from his childhood all the way to like talking about these girls. Like, it's, they ask him, how did you have so much information on this? And he says at one point, I made it all up.
It's too much detailed information to make up.
Yeah.
But the little bit of information that I did find on his background, because it says, in spite of these claims, his life was actually very favorable. He graduated from Columbus High School in Columbus. He earned a physical education degree at the Texas A&M University in College Station, where he also played in the university's Aggie band. After graduation, he found work as a licensed driver and married his first wife in San Marcos. They moved to Western Texas, where they had 3 children. So he does have 3 children. After living on a ranch in Terralingua, Texas for some time, Bell worked as a pharmaceutical salesman. So he would drive down the I-45. Like,
that's where he traveled. That was his route.
He was a salesman up and down that travel. In 1966, he was first arrested for exposing himself to a pair of little girls, for which he was interned at the Big Spring State Psychiatric Hospital. All these, he actually negotiated for a lesser charge. He'd say he'd get help for these crimes. Yeah,
because he sought psychiatric help quite a bit.
Yes, he was seeking help for them.
Constantly in treatment of some sort.
Because it got him out of prison.
Yeah, that's basically how he talked his way out of things, is just through treatment.
He would just get treatment. So after spending some time in treatment, he was released, only to be rearrested for a similar charge in 1969 after he exposed himself to a 13-year-old daughter of a Lubbock, and I know I didn't say that correctly, Lubbock policeman. In order to avoid prosecution, he was interned at the University of Texas Medical Branch for further treatment, where he continued to romance underage patients. By the time of his release, now divorced and forbidden to contact his children, Bell married a 17-year-old female patient, and the pair moved to a beach house in Galveston. But it's very important to note the places where he's working, traveling, living. So he moved to the beach in Galveston. This is a couple years later. So this puts him in Galveston in 1971, where our Maria Johnson.
Yeah, and it's all, he was, I think they said he was a scuba diver.
And he co-owned
a surf shop. Yeah.
With another man. So that's why I think it's very important to see this kind of play out, because the surf shop was where Maria Johnson
and Debbie Ackerman
would visit frequently, because that's where all the kids hung out,
because they were surfers. Avid water skiers.
No, they were surfers.
Oh, the surfers. I thought they water skied too.
They might have water. Yeah, they did all the water sports.
I think water sports were just really big out there, and so it's like all the. He's just. It seems like there's just some sort of connection. Like they were last seen getting into a white van, and he owned a white van.
He owned a white van back then.
So I think they probably knew him from the surf shop.
Yeah.
So when they saw him out there in the van,
they recognized
him.
And that's why Cindy, their classmate that worked at Baskin Robbins, she said they appear to have known the man that they got into the van with, because he just kind of hopped in the van with them and they talked to him and they knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
He actually admits at one point that he did have him in the van with them, that he drove them, but he dropped them off.
Did you kill Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson?
No, I did not.
Did
I
you
had
have
them in
sex
my
with them?
van. I let them out at the Martini Theater and with the setup for Saturday morning at 10 o'clock.
Did you have sex with them?
No.
But you confessed to their murders.
Right. But
Why?
I did not, so that the state would kill me. I was suicidal at that time.
Right.
So he does admit to having them in the van with him.
Yeah.
So then Bell was repeatedly arrested for flashing and masturbating in front of young girls in Lubbock, Pasadena, Plainview, Texas, Backcliff, Houston. I mean, I'm telling you, there is a laundry list.
Yeah, it just goes on and on.
Yes. And he was never charged, or the cases were dropped altogether. It's just from 1969 to 1978, he was arrested 7 times for exposing himself to young girls. June 26, 1978, indecency with a child in Pasadena, Texas. August 1st, 1978, indecency with a child. August 5th, 1978, exposing. August 24th, 1978, murder. So he has a laundry list of this happening. I just think it escalated.
Yeah, for sure.
Just,
and you know, like we said before, this show, the 11, it's odd. It's obviously it's very one-sided because these people were trying to frame him, or not frame him, but they were trying to, you know, connect all the dots,
find the connection.
And you know, I don't know what else is out there, but damn if it's not so convincing.
It was very convincing. And I just wish that we had a map to show you kind of behind us, and they do show it on there where these girls were found.
Maybe we'll try to get one, and just
we could probably put it
just so you guys can see, because I know, I mean, not everybody has been to Texas, but you know, when Shannon and I went, that was the area that we stayed in, was in this, you know, within this 50-mile radius probably.
We stayed right outside of Pasadena.
We were right
My
there.
daughter's right near Pasadena.
Yeah, and so
Texas.
To see how small this area is, and you know, you're basically just surrounded by water and fields, open fields.
Yeah.
And it now makes sense, like, why this is referred to as the Texas killing fields.
Well, and then also when you see this map, you will see kind of where the girls were picked up, where their bodies were found, and where he was living at the time.
Because
where
he was
staying,
living,
where he was working.
He lived in a trailer that looked like a caboose of a train.
Yeah, at one point
and it was red, and he, I believe, moved it a couple times.
Yeah,
this trailer, but it looked like the caboose of a train. And did you see the inside of it?
Yes,
he had animals, like he had
eating
fish
off the bed.
Yeah, he had fish swimming in his kitchen sink. He had a
gerbils just running his bed.
around. Yeah, it was
snake,
filthy. Yeah, like a snake coming out of the kitchen cabinet. It's just very odd behavior. Very, very, you know.
And it was a perfect location if he wanted to grab somebody and take them.
Of course,
because it was in the middle of a field, nothing around.
Mm-hmm.
It was like he had this plot of land that he lived on. He just dropped this trailer there,
and it's crazy because, you know, they interview some of the people who used to live around him, and they all knew that it was there and that he lived there, and they just never would frequent that area. Like, oh yeah, the red caboose, they call it. Oh yeah, it was like back there.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
but I just hope one day these families will get peace. And
you know, in 2019 he passes away, so he's no longer here.
But that's not that wouldn't give me peace, because I still don't know what happened to my baby.
Yeah,
I just And
No, I
that-
meant, I didn't
Yeah.
mean that him passing away
No,
would
of
bring them
course.
peace. I meant like they would never be able to hear anything else from him.
coming from him. And I don't even know if what he was saying towards the end of his life was even worth hearing anymore.
Yeah, you can't.
I just hope they get better with DNA evidence, because I know they got a little bit. It wasn't enough with technology today, but maybe in 20 years, it might be enough.
Yeah. I mean,
connect
it's
them.
just between then and now how things
Yeah.
have progressed so, so much and gotten so good. Hopefully it's just going to get better.
Yeah.
But it's just sad because, most of these people's family, like their parents at least, are all passed on now or, very, very old. And
they have their siblings still. And,
mm-hmm.
but, I just don't know.
It's sad. It's really sad to know that, and now it makes it just so much more spookier to know, and just that literally the first thing I said when we were driving down the I-45, I said to Shannon, I said, my God, like everywhere you look, it would be so easy to just dump somebody and
keep going
and just keep going, and nobody would ever find them.
No.
So it's, it's just so sad. It's so sad that all these girls were just taken this way. So.
And they're so young. Like the girls that we're talking about, when we say like the killing field, it's
between
not
12 to 19 years old.
Yeah, they're not older, and it's not that
babies.
It makes a difference, but these are young
babies.
girls and
just out having fun. And again, like we talked about hitchhiking, like that was just what happened back then. That's just how it was. Of course, today we don't do that, but I think back then it was just, I don't know, people just trusted people more.
Yeah. And it's kind of weird because it's like they're all around the same age, but yet there's different killers. Mm-hmm. And for some reason I would be like, oh, it's all got to be one with these, because they're all so young. It's got the same MO, kind of, but there's copycats out there. There's different people. Oh, it's so easy to dump a body. Oh, I can do it too, kind of thing. And I just can't believe how many crazies live in this world. But anyways, but next week we're going to bring you,
it'll probably be part 3. And we'll talk about the women from the 90s.
Yes.
Who were found. And some of them were, they died. They were murdered in the 70s and the 80s, and their bodies weren't even identified until 2016, 2017. So
it's insane.
A lot of this, hopefully we still have some to be identified, because there are a few Jane Does
that still haven't been
still have not been. And then last week we talked about Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Perdome, who were, back in the 80s, and they weren't identified until
2011.
2000. Yeah. So it,
I don't even remember, but I know it's
I think it was
more
like
recent.
2016, 2017. Like it was very, very recent. So hopefully they will continue to work on these cold cases and, give these families some answers.
Absolutely.
So so thank you very much for listening this week. I know this was a rough one.
Yeah.
It's a rough one to investigate for sure. And
if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments.
Yeah, please comment if you have any questions or comments at all. Like I said, this is like, we get some comments of from people, and we love reading them, who have really taken a deep dive on some of the stories that we've done, especially some of the ones that we did back in Wyoming. And they're really, really, really educated in a lot of this stuff. They've done a lot of work. So if you would like to comment anything that you know, and like we said, this is a very detailed case, like about all of these people, about the girls, about Bell himself.
I feel like give me years and I still will keep finding new stuff. Like it's a rabbit hole, and you go down it and you keep finding more and more and little bit of details here, and things
it's
change.
A lot of work.
And so absolutely. If
and we want to get everything right. We want to get all the facts straight. We want to obviously talk about all of these girls and give respect to all,
Absolutely.
every single one of them.
If things have changed, if things have been updated, if something new's come about, so please, make a comment, let us know. So.
Yeah. And again, if there's any cases, like we're here in California and Los Angeles, but if there's any cases around here, because we only travel maybe once or twice a year, but if there's any cases here local to Southern California that you guys would like us to touch on, that we could visit, maybe in a weekend or something, please, let us know. Creepy, I know you've reached out a couple times with some real bangers.
Yeah.
And so we're going to get on those for sure when we have time. So, so thank you. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, we're at 50 States of Madness. Thank you to all of our Patreons. Your shirts are on the way. Hopefully by the time this airs, you'll have them. And you can check us out on all podcast platforms at 50 States of Madness, and YouTube and Instagram and TikTok.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.